Encounter.
Thank you, sir. I move the motion standing in my name. Sir, the petition that I've brought to the House from 10,561 South Australians calls for a referral to a select committee, indeed, on the petitions request, although my motion accords with the request of the government and the standing orders for it to go to the Social Development Committee, a standing committee of the Parliament, to inquire into a number of matters relating to the South Australian Museum. This is really important. I want to provide a little bit of background to the situation, and then I'll go through what is now expected of the Social Development Committee as they undertake this inquiry, which I understand the government is supporting, although I'm sure they'll speak for themselves shortly. The South Australian Museum is a beloved and cherished institution. It's tremendously important in terms of both South Australia's cultural firmament, but also ongoing and advancing scientific research. It is something that draws school students every day of the year, except for Christmas Day, of course, when it is closed. It draws tourists. It provides inspiration, elevation and education to thousands upon thousands of South Australians. And there wouldn't be a member of this House, sir, who doesn't have a memory of visiting the museum as a child, with a child, as an adult, as a student, or in some context where they have lifted their eyes above what they knew, have been introduced to a new concept, a new piece of anthropology, a new piece of history, a new understanding of Australian Aboriginal culture, a new appreciation of the extraordinary geological natural history of this country, whether it is the native megafauna, the opalized remains of dinosaurs found in the desert, whether it is the Andy Thomas collection, whether it is the opportunity to see exotic animals through the stuffed animal gallery, or indeed the lion twitching its tail, or not, as the case may be. The museum's collections are to be cherished and valued, but unfortunately, the presentation of them could be improved. Some of the galleries are worthy of improvement. But a lot of what goes on at the museum is, of course, behind the scenes. The dozens of researchers who, between them, have collectively more than 400 years of experience serving the state. Some of the research is at the cutting edge of climate science in Australia. Some of the work done through, for example, the tissue lab, through the ultra freezers that were threatened to be closed down, is extraordinarily valuable for understanding South Australia and Australia's place in the world, and the way in which diseases can be tracked, the way in which species are operating. Now, a lot of this was in jeopardy through twin challenges to the museum, ultimately, I think, caused by successive budget cuts. Successive governments, to be sure, but most cruelly, the first budget of the Malinowskis Labor government, which ripped hundreds of thousands of dollars per year out of a museum budget that was already straining under pressure. The board, led by the former chair and the former CE of the museum, had a couple of approaches to how they were going to do this. There was a strategic plan that involved transferring the responsibilities for scientific research from the museum to the universities. Now, those responsibilities aren't just the accidental whims of successive museum leaders or governments in terms of what the museum did. That scientific research work is required of the museum as one of the functions in its act. It is not an optional extra, it is critical to the work of the museum. And of course, while most South Australians will engage with the museum through looking at the displays, looking at the exhibitions, looking at the occasional special exhibitions, much of that work is informed by the scientific research going on behind the scenes. And much of the engagement, whether it's for Aboriginal communities seeking repatriation of remains and cherished loved ones, or whether it is indeed scientific researchers seeking to engage with the collections of the exhibition, that is done behind the scenes by those scientific researchers. So for the museum leadership to seek to address their budget challenges through cutting that research. It wasn't really an option. I acknowledge they were dealing with profound budget challenges, exacerbated especially by the first budget of this government. But that was not the solution. The second aspect of what the petition was seeking to address was what was called the reimagining of the museum. It was a proposal denied by the government for a long time that it was existent until ultimately leaked documents proved that it was a clear proposal endorsed by the board, signed off by the minister, a proposal of this government to reimagine the museum. Now, what did that mean? It meant that there was a hope that they would get some financial support in the way of capital improvements to the museum. It was suggested, although denied and remains denied to this time, that the idea was that with the cancellation, the likely cancellation by this government of Takari, the Aboriginal Arts and Culture Centre, that would free up money to enable them to invest in the museum. And the proposal, the clear plan, suggested basically removing anything from the museum that wasn't South Australian specifically focused and replacing it with new galleries. Now, I'm all in favour of capital investment in the museum to enhance the galleries. And indeed, there are opportunities to do so. There is low-hanging fruit. But there must be a clear intention to retain those collections for public display that are so beloved by so many generations of South Australians. Now, the situation that we were in early last year was when these plans were revealed. Firstly, the announcement of the proposal to remove the jobs of the scientists, and then the suggestion alongside, which was ultimately shown to be true, of this reimagining proposal for the capital infrastructure at the museum. This caused enormous disquiet in the community. And what we saw was about 1,000 people rallying on the steps of Parliament House. It's been cited before, and I again remind the House that the late, wonderful, Honourable Jennifer Cashmore, her last visit to this Parliament prior to her passing was to participate in that rally opposing the restructure and the reimagining of the museum, and it was reflected in her funeral, it was reflected in the condolence motion in this House. But of course, at that rally, it was also acknowledged by me and the former leader of the Liberal Party as the Liberal Party's representatives that ultimately more funding was required. The government needed to commit to more funding. The Liberal Party committed a future Liberal government to increasing the funding at the museum, and we needed a cancellation of the restructure and a cancellation of the strategic direction that had those researchers losing their jobs. This petition that we're considering today was launched on that day, and over the subsequent 3 or 4 months, more than 10,000 signatures were collected. They were collected on the steps of the museum by members of Parliament such as myself and the member for Unley and the member for Frome and the member for Bragg, a range of members of the opposition, including the Leader of the Opposition and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, talking to everyday South Australians on the lawns of the museum who were lining up to sign up. It was collected in suburbs. It was collected by citizen scientists and people involved in all of the groups that engage with the museum. I particularly commend the advocacy and the work of the group of volunteers and donors. I highlight Mary Lou Simpson and her consistent public advocacy for the role of that work, and of course her family, Anthony Simpson and the broader Simpson family, are among the many donors who have contributed so much to the South Australian public good through their support for the museum. Ultimately, the collection of 10,000 signatures triggering a parliamentary inquiry is no small thing. This isn't the only parliamentary inquiry, of course, there has been. The Budget and Finance Committee has brought in the former chair and the former CE to ask them questions. There's been a review that's been underway from the Statutory Authorities Committee of the Legislative Council, and that brought forward a lot of the evidence that was highlighting last year why the government needed to rethink what they were doing. And those have been important bodies of work. In August last year, I tabled this petition, and in September last year, the Premier announced that there was going to be, indeed, a rethink. the government backflipped on their proposals. They spent some time trying to deny any responsibility for them, but they did at least acknowledge that the proposals needed to cease. They let go the chair of the board and replaced him with a new chair of the board. Ultimately, the chief executive was moved on at the end of last year as well. So the government has indicated that they got it wrong and that the new approach needed to be taken. There was a modest, time-limited budget boost to enable decisions around the work of the researchers or whatever else might be done going forward to be worked out over the next period of time. Now, I think it's not bad timing that it's taken us from August last year until now to have this formal referral to the committee take place, because the new chair of the board has been undertaking a significant body of work within the museum community itself, assessing the views of the community, of the views of donors, the views of staff, about how they can make ends meet going forward within their act, and indeed what is the new strategic approach that the museum will take. All of that is worthy. But as that is coming to a conclusion, it's now time for the Parliament to get engaged again, because my message to the government, more than anything else today, as we refer this petition signed by 10,600 South Australians to a committee inquiry of the Parliament, is that the museum needs new investment. The new museum needs new investment in improving its capital infrastructure, and it needs new investment to ensure that it can fulfil its charter, both to the South Australia's public, our school students, our tourists and our interested passers-by who go and engage with the exhibitions, and critically with its mission for scientific, anthropological and other research that must continue. It doesn't have enough money to fulfil those ambitions at the moment. And the money that the government has put in as a short-term measure when they backflipped on their reimagining and their restructure is insufficient going forward. It was time-limited money. And so, today is budget day. I'd love to see significant boost in funds for the museum in today's budget. And if that doesn't happen, then we really will be coming up to it by the end of this year for the museum to have the future that we want it to have. This Parliamentary Committee inquiry will hopefully keep the pressure on the government to put in that budget investment. It will hopefully support the work of the chair of the Museum Board and their board, and indeed all of those passionate South Australians who are doing their best for the museum to ensure that future generations can continue to have the same wonderful experiences that I've had, that so many members of this chamber have no doubt had over the course of their lifetimes. So I certainly, sir, commend the inquiry to the House. This committee inquiry looking at the restructures, that's less relevant now than it was, but the remainder of the petition, the strategic direction of the South Australian Museum, the budget for the South Australian Museum, the reporting relationship, whether it should be in the arts, environment or education portfolios, and indeed how the museum can best maintain and enhance its reputation, collections and scientific credibility going forward.
The member for Elizabeth.
Oh, thank you, sir. I rise to indicate that the government supports the referral of this petition to the Social Development Committee.
I'll put the question. All those in favour say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.